Colleagues, this podcast is designed to help you understand the impact of the education budget cuts on staffing in our schools. Schools get staff in two ways. First, the minimum allocation required using the various formulas and with consideration of the requirement for maximum class sizes. And secondly, additional staff which schools may bring in to support their school planning goals and meet the needs of their students. These staff are paid for from school funds or from extra money they get by applying for grants, submissions, or maybe as a consequence of federal government initiatives. Premier Barnett keeps saying no teacher will lose their job. This is clearly not the case, and I will explain why. In the first instance, the Barnett government has cut teacher positions, reduced the number of teacher jobs in our schools by 1. Smaller schools, ones with a student population of up to 550, have been provided with 1.5 FTE of teacher time to be used for reducing class sizes, running special programs, etc. Schools with student population of between 551 and 860 get a sliding proportion of that 1.5 FTE. This 1.5 FTE has been cut back to 1.2. We've estimated, as a consequence, 350 teacher positions have been lost across the system. 2. Staffing multipliers linked to year level have been changed for secondary schools. And guess what? They've been reduced. We estimate a loss of at least 125 teaching positions because of this factor. 3. Taking away the half day which was provided to Level 3 classroom teachers to work with and for and alongside classroom teachers, helping to model best practice, introducing new strategies, facilitating development of learning plans for children with learning difficulties, and so on. There are about 1,100 of these exemplary teachers in our schools. That means about 110 teaching positions have gone. There are other staffing multipliers attached to intensive English centres, language development centres, and so on, where there have also been cuts. To date, I do not have specifics of these impacts, but we will be gathering them. Also, there are groups such as the School of Instrumental Music who have had teacher cuts. 8 we understand there. That is close to 600 teaching positions cut from schools for 214. We know before this finishes, we will find further cuts to teaching jobs for 214. Then, of course, schools have funds to use for hiring other teaching staff to undertake various roles, for example, reading recovery, extension classes, behaviour and student support, special interest class, for example, art and ICT, and the introduction of new pedagogy. As well as staff cuts, there have been cuts to funds. These include the requirement for schools to pay a long service leave levy, $600 per teacher and $400 for other staff. Schools will have to give back thousands of dollars from funds that should be being used for the education of our children to pay this levy every year. The cut of 30% from the pool of funds called School Support Program Resource Allocation, or SPRA, and the other adjustments to multipliers associated with non-English speaking students and the like. Even more jobs will not be available in our schools in 214 because schools will not be able to run these programs. We cannot forget the other staff cuts which are also occurring. 350 education assistants, 94 Aboriginal education officers, 150 central office and regional office staff, and again the extra staff such as youth workers, attendance officers, school psychs, etc., who would have been employed through the SPRA funds. The Minister and Premier talk about the big growth in education assistance, and that's true, but what they forget to tell us is about the big growth in students with disabilities and special needs we've seen in our mainstream schools as a consequence of inclusion. The Premier and the Minister seem to be telling our secondary schools that they'll have to cut down on subject options for Year 11 and 12. This is a simplistic approach which will spell the death knell of public provision of secondary education in some areas if allowed to proceed. This is a complex issue, but what is clearly accurate is that the Premier and the Minister are promoting cuts to teaching numbers and support staff numbers. This is a complex issue, but what is clearly accurate is that the Premier and the Minister are telling schools that they will not provide funds to enable schools to run many of the important programs, supports and initiatives they have now. In finishing, let me remind you that it is not that long ago that Premier Barnett rejected $320 million and then $671 million of Gonski funds for WA public schools because it was not enough. It can only be said that the Premier, the Minister and the Coalition appear to have abandoned public schools in WA. We, the school leaders, the teachers, the support staff, the parents and the broader community must now stand up and demand a stop to the current education cuts for the sake of our kids, for the sake of our community.